All right, let's dive in. Today, we're taking a closer look at Blarg, this really interesting outsider pop duo from, would you believe it, Cologne,
Your
Germany?
clone, yeah.
Yeah. And we've got like a whole breadcrumb trail to follow, their website, their music on all these different platforms, some reviews we dug up, even a bit of social media
That's
buzz.
like a fun challenge.
It is. It is. It's a real musical detective story, don't you think?
Absolutely. And it looks like the clues are pointing to, well, a band that kind of thrives on contradictions.
Oh, how so?
Well, you got this skeleton mascot, right?
Okay, that's kind of unusual.
Right. And then there's this goal of recording 1,000 songs, which is just, I mean, that's a huge number.
It is. Like, what's the logic behind that?
Exactly. And then to top it off, they call themselves, get this, outsider of the outsiders.
Outsider of the outsiders. Well, that's definitely a statement.
It is.
So where did this all begin? Like, what's the origin story of Blarg?
All right. So picture this, a windowless room in Cologne, right? Two guys, Theodore and Tom, stuffing flyers into envelopes.
Ah, the classic DIY band beginnings.
Exactly. But here's the twist. They're musical fuel. Yura Yura Taikoku, a Japanese psychedelic rock band.
That's not what I was expecting. Not exactly your typical pop duo inspiration.
Right, but that's Blarg for you, defying expectations from the get-go.
So you're telling me Japanese psychedelic rock is baked into their sound?
It's in there, definitely. You'll hear these fuzzy guitar solos, like really bright chiming sounds, all mixed with some pretty experimental textures.
So are they like a rock band then? Or pop?
That's the thing, even the music platforms can't seem to agree.
No kidding. I was looking at their profiles. Discogs has them listed as rock, house, and pop rock.
Right, a real mix.
And then Apple Music just throws them under alternatives. It's like they're intentionally defying categorization.
I think you might be right. They call their music outsider pop, so maybe they're playing with us a little, making us think about how we define genres.
I like that, keeping us on our toes.
Exactly. But I do think that's part of their appeal, you know. They're not afraid to pull from all these different influences. And what they make is genuinely unique.
Speaking of unique, I read about Theodore's vocal technique. He calls it a wall of voices, which sounds, I don't know, kind of intense.
It is. Imagine layers upon layers of vocals, all these bass effects, creating this huge, almost choral sound. It can be pretty haunting and definitely powerful.
Is there a particular song where that really comes through?
Oh, yeah. Their song Darkness, it's got this addictive, driving energy, almost like post-punk, some critics have said.
Darkness. Okay, that's going straight on my to-listen list.
It's a good one. And while you're listening, pay attention to Tom's guitar work, too. He does it all, from these really delicate soundscapes to those fuzzy solos we talked about, adds another layer of complexity to their music.
Wow. All right, I'm starting to get a feel for their sound, but we haven't even mentioned the most unusual band member, Frankie.
Ah, yes, Frankie, the skeleton.
The skeleton mascot.
Exactly. Their stand-in drummer. Right. They actually use a pedal board for backing tracks when they play live, but Frankie's right there on stage with them. It's brilliant, really.
So wait, they have a skeleton on stage with them? That's so weird, but kind of cool.
Right. And I think it speaks to their whole outsider approach. It's like they're taking this practical challenge, needing drums, and turning it into this whole visual statement, a little dash of maybe morbid humor. Very Blarg.
They definitely seem to be embracing that outsider identity, that's for sure. But you know what else they're embracing? A seriously massive discography.
Oh, tell me about it. We're talking over 100 singles, and the album list just keeps growing.
It's like they're on a mission to release every single song they've ever written.
They might be, actually. Remember that goal of 1,000 songs?
Yeah, that's right.
It makes you wonder, in this digital age where everyone's got Spotify and whatnot, what does it even mean to make music on that scale?
Right. Are they trying to, like, drown out the noise? Or are they just following some kind of creative impulse wherever it leads?
I think it might be a little bit of both. They're using the tools they've got, embracing that whole digital world.
But there's also that sense that they're doing it for themselves, like for the pure joy of creating, right?
I think so, yeah. And you got to respect that.
I do. It's like they're saying, here's everything we've got. Take it or leave it. No algorithms, no trends, just pure, unfiltered creativity.
Couldn't agree more. And it's not just about the sheer volume of music. They're also incredibly active online, connecting with fans on all these different platforms.
So they're digitally savvy, but they're also rooted in a physical scene, right? I mean, they were part of the Emergenza band contest at the Jungial Music Club in Cologne.
Right, right. So they're not just like internet sensations. They're out there playing live, connecting with their audience in the real world.
Which is really important. It shows they value that real-life connection, that shared experience of music.
Definitely. It adds another layer to their whole approach.
Okay, so we've talked about their sound, their visuals, their insane amount of music, their online savvy. But what are people actually saying about them? Like, what's the critical reception been like?
It's honestly as diverse as their music. Some reviews focus on that addictive sound we talked about. Others compare them to bands like the Velvet Underground, which is pretty cool.
Velvet Underground, wow.
Yeah, right? But then there's this one statement from Blarg themselves that really caught my eye. They said, "Our music is not good, but it always has a soul."
Wait, did they really say that? Their music is not good. What does that even mean?
It's definitely a head scratcher, right?
Yeah.
I think there's some self-deprecation in there for sure, but maybe they're also challenging us a bit, making us think about what we consider good music.
Right, right. Like maybe it's not always about technical perfection or fitting neatly into a genre.
Exactly. Maybe it's more about feeling, about connection, about that raw expression of, well, their soul.
That's an interesting way to look at it. It makes you think about what truly resonates with you as a listener, right? Is it that polished sound or is it something else, something deeper?
It's a good question to ask yourself, for sure. And with Blarg, you get both, actually. They've got the skills, but they also have that raw honesty.
So they're inviting us into their world, imperfections and all,
I think so, yeah.
which, speaking of their world, takes us to another fascinating layer, their values and worldview. They're very open about their beliefs, and some of them seem to contradict their whole outsider, almost nihilistic persona.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those contradictions that makes them so interesting.
Right.
On their website, they've got this pretty bleak, almost cynical take on things. But then you dig a little deeper and you find these values, prioritizing family over money, being politically active, supporting other artists, being kind.
That's a pretty big contrast.
Right. And then there's their stance on mental health, encouraging people to seek help, talk about therapy. It's almost like they're saying, yeah, the world can be a tough place, but it's still worth fighting for.
That's a pretty powerful message, especially coming from a band that, at first glance, seems to have this really dark outlook.
Yeah, right. And I think it speaks to their complexity, their willingness to embrace contradictions, and honestly, their humanity.
And they're also super open about their neurodiversity. They mention having ADHD, anxiety, and RSD, all of which can make navigating the world, and especially the music industry, a real challenge.
Absolutely. And the fact that they're so open about it,
Hmm.
I think it speaks to their authenticity, their willingness to be vulnerable, which is honestly really inspiring.
I agree. It's like they're saying, it's okay to be different. It's okay to struggle. You're not alone.
Exactly. And that message can be so powerful, especially for younger people who might be dealing with similar issues.
All right, so I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground. Their sound, their visuals, that mountain of music they've released, their online presence, their values, their openness about mental health.
It's a lot to unpack for sure.
It is. But we're just scratching the surface of Blarg's world. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve deeper into their music and how they use it to explore some of these big questions about art, meaning, and the human experience. All right, welcome back to our Blarg deep dive. I don't know about you, but I'm still processing all of that from part 1.
It's a lot to take in, for sure. I mean, we've barely scratched the surface.
Barely. But one thing's for sure, they're not afraid to challenge us.
Absolutely not. It's like they want to make you think, to question everything you thought you knew about music.
Exactly. But let's go back to that 1,000 song goal for a minute.
Oh, yeah,
It's such a huge number. It's almost absurd, right?
it is kind of.
So in this day and age, with so much music out there, everyone on Spotify, does releasing that much music, like, does it dilute its impact? Or
Oh.
does it actually amplify it?
It's a good question. It really makes you think about how we consume music now.
Totally. Like, some people might say it's impossible to maintain quality when you're putting out that much stuff.
I can see that argument.
But I also think Blarg is kind of challenging that notion.
How so?
Well, they're not aiming for this, like, polished perfection. They're embracing the raw, the imperfect, the experimental.
Right. It's about capturing a moment, a feeling, an idea.
Exactly. And by releasing so much, they're sort of inviting us into that process. Like, come along for the ride.
It's a different way of thinking about it, for sure.
It is. And I think there's something really generous about that.
Yeah.
They're not holding back. They're just sharing everything.
It's refreshing, honestly. No pretense, no filter.
Okay, but let's talk about the actual music for a minute. Can you give us an example of how they blend all those different genres, make something truly unique?
Sure. Take international travel, for instance. It's got these driving, almost punk drums, layered with shimmering psychedelic guitars. Then Theodore's vocals come in, creating this tapestry of harmonies and distortion.
Wow.
It's a catchy, chaotic, definitely thought-provoking. It's pure Blarg.
It sounds like it.
It is. And I think that song also highlights another key aspect of their music, the lyrics.
Oh, yeah, we haven't really talked about those yet.
Well, they often explore themes of loneliness, isolation, that search for meaning in a world that can feel, well, pretty chaotic at times.
Right, so they're not shying away from the darker stuff?
Not at all. Take their song So Lonely.
So lonely.
It's raw,
Yeah.
It's about feeling disconnected, not just from other people, but maybe from yourself too. Something a lot of people could probably relate to.
Especially these days, right?
Right.
It's interesting how Blarg's openness about their neurodiversity kind of ties into those themes.
Totally. You can hear how their experiences with ADHD, anxiety, RSD shape their perspective, how they see the world.
So they're turning those challenges into something creative.
Exactly. And they're
Right.
making it okay to talk about those things,
Yeah.
normalizing those feelings.
It's a powerful message, especially for those who might feel misunderstood or alone.
It really is. And that message of acceptance is a big part of their online community, too.
Yeah, that's another interesting piece of the puzzle.
It is. They use their website, social media, music platforms in these really distinct ways.
It's like they're creating different facets of themselves online, each one reflecting a different part of their personality.
I like that. Creating
Yeah.
different facets, it's true.
Yeah.
And it allows them to connect with different types of fans, different preferences.
And it all comes back to their outsider status, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They're playing by their own rules, creating their own world, inviting people in.
I love that. And you know what else is great? Despite that sometimes bleak outlook, their music ultimately feels hopeful.
I agree with you there.
They're acknowledging the darkness, the chaos, but they're choosing to respond with creativity, connection, this belief in the power of human resilience.
Like, yeah, things are messed up, but we're still here. We're still creating. We're still finding ways to connect with each other.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that's what makes their music so powerful.
I do too. It's a reminder that even in the face of uncertainty, there's still beauty to be found. There's still hope. There's still the power of music.
And that brings us to another really interesting aspect. Their commitment to using their platform to talk about climate change.
Oh, right. They've been very vocal about that.
Very vocal. They've even referenced the 1988 James Hansen report, which, that was a turning point in climate science.
So they're not just like casually mentioning it. They're engaging with the issue on a deeper level.
Right. They're educating themselves and they're encouraging their fans to do the same.
Exactly. They're using their music, their voice to spark a conversation, encourage action.
It's inspiring, honestly. It shows that they're not just a band. They're artists, they're activists. They're using their creativity to make a difference.
And that's what makes them so unique. They're not just making music, they're trying to change the world.
Okay, I think that's a great place to wrap up part 2. We've explored their music, their message, their impact.
We've gotten pretty deep.
We have, but there's still one piece of the puzzle to figure out. That tension between their nihilistic persona and their seemingly optimistic values.
The contradiction that keeps on giving.
Exactly. We'll delve into that in part 3, where we'll try to unravel the enigma that is Blarg. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to our blog deep dive, the final chapter. We've been through a lot with these guys, haven't we?
We have their music, their values, that online world they've built. It's been quite the journey.
It has. But I feel like we've arrived at the heart of the mystery.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
It's this whole question of how can a band that, embraces nihilism also be so driven to create, to connect, to make the world a better place?
It's the paradox at the center of Blarg, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do those pieces fit together?
Exactly. Do you think it's a genuine struggle for them? Or is it more like, part of their artistic persona, a way to get our attention?
I've thought about that a lot.
Mm-mm.
And I think it's probably a bit of both, to be honest.
Yeah.
Remember that statement they made? Our music is not good, but it always has a soul.
Oh, yeah, that was a weird one.
Right. But it kind of hints at their self-awareness, like they're in on the joke, playing with us a little.
I see what you mean. They're not taking themselves too seriously, which is cool.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I do think there's a real sense of them wrestling with these big questions,
Yeah.
Searching for meaning in a world that can feel pretty chaotic.
Right. So maybe their nihilism isn't about apathy or negativity.
I don't think so, no.
It's more about acknowledging, like, the absurdity of it all.
Exactly. It's like they're saying, yeah, we see the darkness, we get it, but that doesn't mean we're giving up.
It's almost like a starting point for them, a foundation.
I think you're right. It's like, okay, the world's a mess, but what are we going to do about it? We can sit around and complain, or we're going to do something. And they've very clearly chosen to do something.
And that something is pretty impressive when you think about it. Making music, pouring their hearts into it, speaking out about their values, building a community.
And don't forget their openness about their neurodiversity.
Oh, right, right. Talking about ADHD, anxiety, RSD. It takes guts to do that.
It does. And I think it sends a really powerful message, especially to young people who might be struggling with similar things.
Totally. It's like they're saying, hey, it's okay to be different. It's okay to not be okay. You're not alone in this.
And that kind of honesty, that vulnerability, it's really refreshing, isn't it? In a world where everyone's trying to project this perfect image.
It is. It makes their music so much more relatable.
Oh, for sure. It's not just about catchy hooks or clever lyrics.
Yeah.
It's about real human experiences, struggles, searching for something.
It's like they're inviting us along on this, like, messy, chaotic, but ultimately kind of hopeful journey.
That's a great way to put it. And it's a journey that never really ends, does it?
Nope. And that's what makes their music so exciting. There's this constant evolution, this willingness to experiment.
Like their song Shadow Heart.
Yeah.
It's got this dark, almost industrial vibe, but then there are these moments of like fragile beauty.
Right. They're always pushing boundaries, challenging our expectations.
Exactly. Which brings us back to that 1,000 song goal. It's such a bold statement, right?
It is. I mean, in a world where we're constantly bombarded with information, music, everything, can you really make a meaningful impact with that much output?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
And I think it depends on how you define impact, you know?
True, true. Some people might say it's all about quantity, reaching as many people as possible.
Right. But for Blarg, it seems more about this like relentless creative drive.
Mhm.
They just got to get it all out there.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe it's also about pushing back against that whole idea of scarcity in music.
Oh, I like that.
Like, hey, there's enough space for everyone's creativity.
Exactly. And in a way, that's kind of an optimistic message, isn't it?
It is, especially coming from a band that, we've been calling nihilistic this whole time.
Right. It's like they're acknowledging the limitations, the chaos, but they're choosing to create anyway, to connect anyway.
So maybe that's the key to Blarg, the thing that makes them so compelling.
What do you mean?
They're this walking, talking, music-making contradiction. They're not afraid to embrace the darkness and the light, the absurdity and the hope.
I think you're onto something. They're showing us that it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can be both. You can acknowledge the messiness of life and still find beauty in it.
And maybe that's what we can all take away from Blarg, right?
I think so. Don't be afraid to be yourself, contradictions and all. Don't be afraid to create, to connect, to fight for what you believe in, even if it feels like the world's falling apart around you.
And that's a pretty powerful message, wouldn't you say?
It is. It really is.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Blarg. It's been a wild ride, but I hope you've learned something along the way.
Me too. And who knows, maybe you'll even be inspired to go check out their music for yourself.
That's right. Go explore, see what resonates with you. And until next time, keep those ears open and those minds